Good morning. So this is the last morning news beat of 2020, and Michael Sansolo and I thought we would do something different this year and sort of look back at the year just passed. I don't think either of us are sorry to see 2020 in the rearview mirror. Look forward a little bit and maybe save some time at the end for a somewhat more whimsical discussion, for lack of a better phrase. Um, and listen, Michael, in terms certainly of the food retailing business, which is what we write about more than anything else, it was in some ways, oddly enough, it was actually a good year in the sense that, 12 months ago now, more than half of the food that was being consumed in this country was being consumed outside the home, or is being bought from places, not being bought from supermarkets. And that has obviously gone through a dramatic change. And as we know, because supermarket workers were defined widely as being essential,
Yep, and deservedly.
stepped up to the plate.
Mhm.
Um, I guess it's a good. I mean, listen, it's a good thing that people are cooking more and eating more at home. The question is whether that's sustainable long term once the pandemic is over.
Hey, Kevin, I think that's a great place to start. And first of all, to any supermarket workers out there who happen to be watching this, we have to salute them because what they did this year, we don't tend to think about people who are working cash registers or stocking shelves as being heroes, but their work was heroic because they were on the front lines, total necessity, but they came through for us when we needed it. But I'm with you. I mean, basically, we had 50% of the calories that used to be eaten out at restaurants and offices, at schools, wherever it was. All of that moved back home. And some of the financials for the food industry have been just wonderful. I find it hard to believe that once everybody is vaccinated, it should only happen. And once we have COVID under control, and I've written about this before, I think we're having the conflict of two diseases here, COVID on one hand and cabin fever on the other hand. And I think people are going to say, we're going out to eat. Think of all those moms who have jobs outside the home, who have been home, taking care of the house, educating their kids, doing everything. And I think they're going to turn to whoever else is in the house and say, folks, we're going out for pizza tonight. So I believe there may be small gains because people may have discovered they like cooking at home and it wasn't as hard as they thought. And it's economical, it's nutritious, it has all those things going for it. So maybe there's some small gain, but I don't think we're going back to 1957 where 80% of the meals were eaten at home.
Yeah, I think date night is gonna take on all new importance once we
Mhm.
get to the other side of this thing, or at least well past the other thing. The problem is it may take longer because people already are getting cabin fever and are going out for date night and maybe shouldn't be at this point. Yeah, I mean, to me, it one of the things that it's critical for retailers to do is to, I mean, first of all, don't be complacent about the fact that you got all this business.
Mhm.
Don't think to yourself for a moment, oh no, how great is this? How great am I?
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, and I've probably said this 1,000 times, basically to have sales gains, if you were a supermarket during 2020, as long as there was product coming in the back door, all you had to really do was open the front door.
Mhm.
Right. Now there were retailers who actually took advantage of this opportunity and were able to build on it and do different things and were able to improve their offering. When I think about, let's look at, say, Lunds and Byerly's in Minnesota, creating an alliance with food trucks in that market and basically creating these food truck installations in some of their stores, which does a couple. I mean, first of all, they've got really, really good food. They're better than the vast majority of supermarkets, but they even recognize that would create variety, would create innovation, and would create interest in the store in a way that would be really, really positive. Kroger putting a ghost kitchen into one of their stores. So I think it's the retailers who realize this is a moment where we can innovate, and if they continue to do so, it'll be to their advantage. If people stop moving forward as fast as they've been moving forward, I think then they're going to be in for a world of hurt.
Well, and I agree with you. And you and I have talked about this through the year, that if you're born on third base, you can't wake up thinking you hit a triple. And this year for food retail, they lost their biggest competitor when suddenly those other 50% of the calories came home. I would, as I look forward, I think the structural change we're going to see from 2020 going forward, consumers have learned how to shop remotely. And certainly curbside pickup, which if we magically went back 1 year, nobody was really talking about how curbside pickup was going to be this essential thing. And I find it interesting to reflect back. You got to think all the way back to last year's Super Bowl, which happened before COVID. And one of the ads in the Super Bowl was from Walmart. And remember that really quirky
All
ad?
the different cars, all the different vehicles.
Starship Enterprise, the Millennium Falcon, they all showed up and picked up their order. And Walmart was establishing in the consumer's mind that we have this service. You call in your order, you do your order online, come to the store, you get it curbside. And people have learned that. What I think we're going to see, it's going to be interesting to watch, is do people miss the experience of simply shopping? And again, if we went back a year and we had said to people, hey, you don't have to walk the aisles of a supermarket anymore, there may have been a lot of shoppers who would say, it's a chore, it's boring, I do it every week. And now I think they would pay to do it just for the normalcy of walking down an aisle and saying, we haven't had that in a while. And
I'm not sure.
it's going to be a brief moment. I see you nodding your head in the wrong direction there. I think it's going to be part of the normal is back. I mean, people are going to want to go to McDonald's. And I know you're not a McDonald's fan. People are going to want to go out to get a bag of French fries.
Yeah, I think that if that happens, and it could well happen, I do also think, though, that it could be short-lived in the
I
sense
agree with you.
that, people who have discovered that click and collect and delivery, all of a sudden they're getting all these hours back in their day. I mean, it's the same reason that a lot of people, and there's a lot of thought that, that the remote working will continue to be a thing, certainly not at the scale that it's been over the last 10 months, but suddenly people who had long commutes, who got an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours back in their day where they could actually be productive, will not be in such a hurry to go back to the office. Although I would imagine there'll be people who say, oh no, I got to get out of the house. That those 2 hours of commuting were heaven, because I didn't have to listen to kids. But I do think that, I've always said this. I mean, there have always been people who have written in the Morning Newsbeat arguing that, not necessarily using this word, but sort of taking the position that shopping in the store is morally superior and ethically superior than to shopping online. And I've always disagreed with that. I think anything that gives me more time to read a book, go for a run, take my dog for a walk, spend time with my wife, cook a meal, coach Little League Baseball, pick any of these things or more, and 1,000 other things, that's much better. And I'm not sure it's a matter of moral, ethical superiority. I just think that one of the interesting things about the last, and I think we've written this on Morning Newsbeat, is that people have been innovating over the last 10 months, but not thinking of it as innovation. It was survival.
It's been reaction. And actually, I think your bigger point is correct. And I don't say that all the time to Kevin or anybody.
No, rarely.
But you're going to get people back. The short term, once COVID is tamed, is that people will say, I want to go back because I haven't been able to. And very quickly they'll discover, it wasn't so bad to sit on the sofa and fill out an order. You're going to get them back. This is a gift. So you got to make that first month, it's got to be special. We have talked in the past about the importance of experience. And unless when they go back and if they say, I went back, it really wasn't that great, I'll sit on the sofa and do this on my iPad, you've lost them. So when they come back, it's got to be with sampling. It's got to be with demonstrations. Let's do things that when people come back to the store will make them say, wow, I'm glad I can come back to this store.
Well,
and I think your point about Lunds and Byerly's is dead on. We're talking about food. People love food. A food truck. I mean, you and I have both seen the movie Chef, and we salivated all the food they ate in that movie. let's make food the star, and let's win people back, and let's not just assume they can come back, ergo they will come back. I'm not
Well,
sure they will.
and there have been some retailers who have realized that there's all this restaurant talent that has suddenly become available and have gone after it. And
Hmm.
they've been really, really smart. Again, but supermarkets that say, okay, but we're gonna just be in the supermarket food business are not taking advantage of the moment and the fact that this gave them an opportunity to create for themselves differential advantages that would serve them long term. I mean, we're looking at right now. I was writing down some notes for myself, and I was thinking, well, so what to look forward in terms of 2021. I actually think retailers have to be sitting there thinking to themselves, what about 2030?
Hmm.
They have to start that process now. I mean, I think again, the stuff we've talked about on Morning Newsbeat for a long time, it was critically important 4 and 5 years ago for retailers, even those who didn't want to get into the delivery or click and collect business, to start laying the pipe, if you will, so they could make that transition easily, as opposed to have to retrofit stores entirely, um, because that's a lot harder to do. And even my local Whole Foods, now owned by Amazon, I mean, they're not set up optimally for that. So you've got to lay the pipe now. You had to lay the pipe 4 or 5 years ago, so you're ready to do it now. So it seems to me in a lot of ways, you've got to be laying the pipe now, thinking about 2030. Okay, what does that mean? And again, it's a piece that I did on Morning Newsbeat. Think about all these young people who
Hmm.
remote learning, right? Okay, are they going to want to shop the same way? I would argue no. Maybe for
I
maybe.
think you're right on that. And we have to remember the two youngest generations of shoppers, millennials and Gen Z, they don't want to shop the way we did or their grandparents did. We might be their grandparents, which is kind of upsetting. So stores, I am with you on this. A lot of folks got forced to do a lot of things because of the crisis. And I don't remember whose quote it is. It's somebody out of politics that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
I
I think
think
what
usually
companies have to
it's to
do.
Winston Churchill, but then occasionally they find other people. But I think
Yes,
he's the popular.
you can give him every quote.
Yeah, we'll go. Yeah, yeah, you can't go wrong with Churchill.
You always go with Churchill or Lincoln. It always works. But if you inside your company during this crisis, you started click and collect, you started whatever it was, you now have to go to school on it. What was it that worked about it? How do we make this an asset? Because what we may find, and again, we've talked about this before, there are parts of the grocery shopping trip that are very much rote. That, and obviously Center Store did great during this period because people needed to stock up. They are not going to continue doing that once the period ends. There may be some, let's make sure, the larder is full because Lord knows what will happen next. But let's figure out ways to take the boring part out of the trip and make the exciting part more exciting. And this would be a great period for companies. And I know this is something you and I always are preaching. Sit down with your teams. Find out what the people who worked for you, how did they survive this? And what could you learn? And you might discover things. I think you had something recently about Walmart's linkage to TikTok. And, quite honestly, and again, if you and I go on TikTok, they will throw us off because they don't want people who look like us. But TikTok is another one of these devices that it really works with certain generations. And
You just proved it, by the way. I don't think TikTok is a device. I think
it's an app, yes. Thank you for that. I could have had one of my kids come in to tell me how out of touch I am, but it's good to have you do that for me. But I think if people inside companies sit down with their staff and say what really worked and what didn't work. Now, I don't know about how you've been shopping this period, and I'm very fortunate. My wife is a wonderful cook. I know you do a lot of the cooking in the Coupe household, and you do a lot of the shopping, and I'm actually the second shopper. I accompany my wife. She has found shopping online to not be as enjoyable as she thought because she basically has to sit there and think aisle by aisle, what might I need? And then there are those, all the ridiculous questions we ask ourselves in a store. We need apples. Do we need big apples, small apples? Do we need red, green, delicious, Macintosh, Macoun, whatever? And online, she has found it to be stressful. And so it's a matter of, I think if we sit with our staffers and certainly let's talk to our best customers. Let's use And you have talked about this recently on Morning Newsbeat. Let's use our loyalty programs as a way to really create connections. And we should be talking to shoppers of what worked and what didn't. And you made a great suggestion.
I have to say, online shopping may be the least stressful part of my day. I'm also not a good comparison because I have Stu Leonard's.
Hmm.
Stu Leonard's has 1,200 SKUs. They have the fun. They have mostly the 1,200 fun SKUs.
Yes.
And so, they've been creating an experience for the 38 years that I've been going there, and before that. And so so I have had that advantage. Stu Leonard's is not a place I would probably think about shopping online. Um, but that's them.
That's them. That's also you. And someone like Stu Leonard's, which, if anyone has not had a chance to see it, it's really an experience to shop. And that's why Stu Leonard's in some respects proves the case. It's actually in many respects an inconvenient shop because it only has 1,200 SKUs, and the Coupe household uses a lot of other items than those 1,200. But you still go to Stu Leonard's knowing it requires you to make a second shopping trip because you may have to pick up things like laundry detergent.
But a lot of that second trip now is online, and that's the point.
Okay.
But the fun and differentiated stuff is the stuff that I go to Stu Leonard's for, and my local Whole Foods. But I'll come back to that later. But all the other stuff, the stuff that there's no advantage in getting it, whether it's Tide or Oreos. We don't eat a lot of Oreos, but that kind of packaged goods, there's no advantage in getting in from the store. But then there have been other companies, and I talked about Lunds and Barley's before. I mean, I think it's really interesting that HEB chose the pandemic to open a food hall in Boston. Now, clearly, a food hall it's not necessarily the best thing to do at the moment, but they are, again, that's a matter of laying the pipe. That's a matter of preparing for the fact that the world will change, but focusing on food and understanding that you differentiate yourself when you're in the food business as opposed to being in the bag, bottle, carton business.
Yes. And HEB is brilliant at that business. And HEB, in many respects, may be the superstar company of this period because, and again, we wrote about this on Morning Newsbeat way back at the beginning of the COVID crisis, and they were profiled, I think, in Texas Monthly Magazine because there was no crisis of supply chain at HEB. They actually have people looking out around the globe, looking at trends.
They sent people to China.
Yes.
To figure out what was going on in advance.
And then they started up ordering of key items. Now, of course, HEB, because they're heavily in Texas and they have experience with storms, they know what people are going to buy in times of crisis, and they loaded up on that. So when the wave of panic shopping hit, HEB was ready. But I think to your point, and they are a very well-run company, they are looking at those younger shoppers and they're saying, all right, how are they going to want to eat, shop, and cook in the future? And a food hall concept they're looking 5 years ahead saying that may be who we become.
It's interesting, I actually say I admire companies that continue to renovate stores, to open new stores. I mean, Southeastern Groceries. They're not HEB, but they have opened a bunch of stores, renovated a lot of stores, and they've been doing a lot of, I think, interesting things. I mean, time will tell whether or not these are the things that get them to 2030, and they're going to, IPO. There's a lot of other things going on there, but I think that I admire the fact that they keep investing. They keep trying to make their stores as relevant as they can possibly make them. Let me ask you a quick question. So hot bars, salad bars, gone forever?
It's funny because right now I don't think you could pay me enough money to go to a salad bar or a hot bar, but I think they will come back. It's going to take time for certain things to come back. I think people like it. It's the notion of, you're assembling your own meal, you're assembling, whether it's going to be a package of hot foods, cold foods, whatever, but they're going to come back. I think they'll look different because we're all aware of germs in a way we've never been aware of them before. And so when they come back, there's probably the glass is going to come down a lot more. There's already that one mechanical device that assembles the salad for you so nobody touches it. So I think they come back, but they're not going to look like they used to look.
Yeah, it's funny. I was never a salad bar guy. Just didn't do it for me. But I love poke bars, and that I always like, because if you get poke made by somebody else, they never get the proportions the way you like it, and
Mhm.
that I have to say I miss. I mean, there are none of those in Connecticut, but out west I used to go to those all the time. Very quickly before we move on to the whimsical portion of our program, we talked about a lot of different things. One thing we have not talked about, and we should pay a little bit of attention to, is the whole notion of value formats.
Mhm.
The company is the country is in economic distress at the moment. It will take time to dig out of that. And listen, you've got the Wincos, which continue to grow. You've got dollar stores that continue to grow. You've got the Aldis and the Lidls that continue to open new stores. And I think that that is the other format, right? If you look at food-driven stores that are doing this kind of thing over here, the HEBs, the Dorothy Lanes, the Bristol Farms, the Lunds Byerlys. But then there's also, listen, there's those other guys who are I think, going to be very successful, because they are going to be in tune with one element of our times.
And this has been something that I have been talking about throughout COVID, and I think it's going to be true. 2021 is not going to look like 2019 because a lot changed here. And the economic crisis, every bit of statistics you see, the amount of families who have fallen into poverty, there's a lot of economic pain out there. Every recession, every downturn is different than the previous one. And clearly the big difference with what is coming now, because the economic downturn has already started, is that there are these now extreme value formats that didn't used to be dotting the landscape. I would not be surprised if, as we go through this next economic cycle, that we are all somewhat taken aback by the share of sales that Aldi will have by the time we get to the end of this, because they've opened a lot of stores. They have a lot of experience. And I think one of the things, if you go to an Aldi, it's not a crappy store. Their private label is actually nice quality, and they have managed to step it up over time. I think the challenge that more mainstream retailers have is how it's a lot of pivoting that's going to have to go on here. Now, I've talked in the past because we shop at Wegmans, and we really love Wegmans. One of the things I thought Wegmans did so brilliantly coming through the recession of 2008, 2009, was they talked a lot about the affordability of good family meals. And they had signs up all over the store that for $6, here's what you can put together. Or they would say, to feed your family for under $4 a person, you get A and B and C. And they laid it out beautifully in the store. So even a consumer hard pressed by economics, and they look at a Wegmans and think, this is too fancy. This is going to be high price. And Wegmans is not. They do a great job of leading with price on their private label. And they do a great job of talking to the consumer about the overall economics of a meal. And I think other retailers have to learn from this. But the most important recognition is there's going to be economic pain coming out of this. And so I think your question is dead on. And there are the Wincos out there. There are all the dollar formats, whether it's Dollar Tree, Dollar General. There are a lot of those operators now. And for consumers who are struggling economically, that's an answer. And it's an answer, if it gets food on the table, it's a win.
When the pandemic, once we're 70 to 80% of of the population is vaccinated, and we've got to the point where we can start to go out, we have to remember 80% of the restaurants in this country may have been closed by that point.
Mm-hmm.
There will be fewer places to go, and there's still going to, and that means of all those restaurants, a lot of those people remain unemployed.
Right.
And so, that's going to be, I think, the economy always comes back for the top 5% a lot faster than it comes back for the lower 50 or 60%. And that's
in this recession, more so because people who have office jobs, who are in higher level positions, have been working from home. They have been able to continue. But people who wait tables in a restaurant or hospitality workers in a hotel, they could be chambermaids, whatever they might be, people are hurting. And that point is out there. By the way, before we move on to the whimsical part of our discussion, which is really everyone should know where we live, The other big thing the industry is going to have to grapple with coming out of it is, I believe, inventory management and assortment. Because we all saw the videos, the pictures, and you had stores with gulfs of empty shelves. And there were other products that, frankly, you wanted and they were there. You and I laughed for months over my story about that, the last shopping trip I did as the wave hit. I'm shopping with my daughter in a store. The frozen food aisle is completely picked over, except they were completely in stock on frozen lima beans. And what it said to me clearly was, even when people are desperate, they don't want frozen lima beans. And I'm sure the lima bean association with America, I feel that way too. And stores, you know, in some respects, we've been given a gift. Companies should be looking at their sales data back from February and March and saying, what was it we ran out of first? And what were the items that even after the wave of panic shopping hit,
You couldn't get
on
them.
the shelf?
Right.
And why are they there? Or why are they there in the number of facings they are? And so there might be some tremendous internal discussions, and you know, maybe 40,000 SKUs isn't what a store should have. Hopefully people listen to what you said about Stu Leonard's, 1,200 SKUs, but it satisfies the needs of those customers. Look at Costco. Sales are up at Costco.
Think about the notion of essential.
Mm-hmm.
And essential means a lot of different things. I mean, I could list a number of things that I would argue are essential that maybe other people wouldn't. So essential means different things for different people. But the point is that they have access to all this data. So they know, and it's not always the products that sell the most, but what products are selling to your best customers too.
Right.
They have to admit, I mean, that's the thing that I did on Morning Newsbeat the other day about, you know, are you using your loyalty data to reach out to your customers and be essential to them? You know, prove you're loyal to them as opposed to expecting them to be loyal to you. Anyway, let's, you and I could probably do this for days.
Well, people may be home and bored. We could become a whole Netflix
They
series.
started drinking a little while ago. But part of the reason we decided to do this is we were having a conversation, and we started with the Whimsical, and I asked you the question, and I actually had an answer to the question first. Was what's the weirdest metric that you can think of that sort of makes you aware of how our lives have changed over the last 10 months? I know what mine is, but I'm going to let you go.
I know what yours is, and it's so good. Don't hang up now, people. You want to hear this. I think for me, and your question triggered it, Kevin and I both, in normal times, traveled a great deal. And because of that, when you travel a great deal, you have a toiletry kit that goes with you all the time. And I realized I had not touched my toiletry kit in months. So prompted by Kevin, I opened it up and discovered, you know, there's some critical items in there. Like I carry ibuprofen in case I get a headache. It had expired. My toothpaste, I didn't realize toothpaste has an expiration date. Mine had expired. And then also because we both do a lot of public speaking and we're in hotels and convention centers where the air is dry, I always carry saline spray because it helps keep the sinuses lubricated, which helps my throat. It not only expired, it evaporated. So I opened my toiletry kit and basically had to throw everything out. So that's my metric.
So
what's your metric?
My metric is this. I was out taking the dog for a walk, and I called Michael when I got home, and I said, you know something weird? I haven't peed any place other than my home since February 26th, 2020. I said, and because
it's a highbrow element.
So who uses public bathrooms these days, right? I haven't been anywhere. And you had actually been to a very, very small family wedding, so you did not have the same experience. And then I realized subsequently, I actually had one in one other place when my wife was in the hospital having her knee replaced. I used the bathroom in her room. So there was one time, but that was just a strange metric. And I'm sure watching the dog pee on the side of the road that got me to thinking.
It got you jealous. And by the way, I feel compelled to say this. The small family wedding was my child.
Right.
And we had to go to Chicago to do this. And, for anyone out there from the state of Ohio, you have the cleanest public restrooms along the interstates in Ohio that I have ever seen.
Your
But
tax
you use
dollars
the
are worth.
bathroom now like you're a surgeon. It's like, I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to walk in. Well, everything was touchless, thank God. And it was a little terrifying to go into a public
Chalk
bathroom.
one up for Mike DeWine, right? There you go.
Yes, go
Okay.
Ohio.
What are the things you miss most about your old life?
Well, that's a tough one. Well, again, we used to travel quite a bit. And I will tell you, I
Be
miss
specific, though. What's something you really miss?
just going out for pizza. I really miss, there's this local pizza place, and let's get into the little bit of the weeds here. On Thursday night, you get a personal pizza, it's a special, and you get to put 3 toppings on it. And my wife and I have been married for 37 years, but one of the real fault lines in our marriage is we do not agree on those 3 toppings. There is one topping I put on that I know at gunpoint she won't eat, and she knows the same about me. So we get our pizzas, and we have the same waitress who laughs about this every week. I haven't seen that waitress since February, and I haven't had a pizza with olives on it since then.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, so things like that really matter. So you miss that waitress, right? There's one thing you miss about your whole life. I miss Morgan at Edda's. I really do. I mean, Tom Douglas closed down almost all his restaurants back in early part of the spring. Edda's was one of them. Morning Newsbeat readers know that I have written voluminously about Edda's. Morgan, the bartender there, who I've stayed in touch with. I want to make sure he's okay. But I miss being able to walk into Edda's just north of the Pike Place Market in downtown Seattle and see Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
And see his girlfriend Barb, who's a waitress there too, and just hanging out with them. And it's like, it is I miss the Pacific Northwest. I missed Portland desperately this summer because school, I didn't teach at Portland State this year. But if I had to isolate 1 or 2 specific things, I miss Edda's, I miss Morgan, and everything they represent, right? Mm-hmm. They are both, so they're both tangible and symbolic in terms of. And
it's interesting, we both actually ended up in the same place. We missed people, experience, and some sort of food at the same time.
What's kept you sane? And I should say here, so the first question is going to be what kept you sane, and then what's made you crazy. We talked. I don't know what his answer is going to be, folks, but I did say one of the things we should not include in either. We cannot mention family members.
Okay.
Right? So you can't. So nobody can get mad at us because we mentioned one and not the other, or we said
they're mad at us anyhow.
Our wives made us crazy. I would never say this, but So we've taken family members off the table. We can't refer to them.
As a setup, that's interesting. I just read an interview with the magician comedian Penn Jillette, where he was asked what was the happiest thing about COVID, and he said, spending all this time with my family. What was the worst thing? Spending all this time with my family. For me, the thing that kept me sane, and I'd say 2, my daughter has these 2 wonderful dogs, and my daughter doesn't live far from us. So we've had time with the dogs, and because dogs are in the moment, they just keep you sane.
You're also cheating because the dog is a family member too, but I'll let you off.
Okay, all right. But I guess the other thing would be I got myself some exercise equipment because I couldn't go to the gym anymore. And I've been exercising like a maniac. I'm doing yoga, which I never did before. And I know that I'm actually better off by doing this. And it's really helped keep me sane.
And probably a lot healthier than I am, because the thing, other than our 2 dogs, and I always say, we have this new puppy, Spencer, who is now a little over a year old. And it's amazing how and we've had lots of dogs in our lives, and I've loved them all. And in very short period of time, I've loved this dog as much as I've loved any dog in my life. I've always loved the thing where they talk about heaven is where you go, and all the dogs you've loved are there to greet you. I mean, this is enough of a reason in my life to believe in an afterlife. The thing that kept me sane, unlike exercising and yoga, the thing that's kept me sane is making pizza on Saturday nights. I never used to do that. Now I cheat a little bit because I get the dough that you have to roll out, but I'm not making my dough from scratch. I love, and my family laughs at me, because I flip on maybe a little jazz. Sometimes I'll listen to Dean Martin because it seems appropriate. And I'll make pizza and I'll roll it out and I use the flat dough and I make my own pizzas. And they're not great to look at. They tend to be longer than they are round. It's the thing that's kept me sane. Saturday night making pizzas. I love it. It's just
And by the way, if our demographic wasn't old enough already, the Dean Martin references just put us in a whole new, because for anyone out there under the age of about 50, go Google Dean Martin and you're just going to be shocked.
right. What's made you crazy?
Just the inability to go anywhere. You and I both have sons living in Chicago. And the thing probably that has bothered me most in this period, as I said, my son got married during this. We went to the wedding. It was a small wedding. Just given the way things are, I have not hugged my new daughter-in-law. I have not hugged my son since his wedding. And they're both classical musicians. And usually they're traveling the country playing concerts. I love going to their concerts. And it's made all of us here crazy that we can't see them and we can't see them perform.
Yeah. I'm with you on the hugging thing. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are kissers. I've never been a kisser. I miss hug, but I'm a hugger. I am just a hugger, and I believe in big bear hugs. And I miss that. That's been, if I hadn't even thought about that. Things made me crazy. Lack of good Chinese food in Connecticut. Now, and frankly, for the most part, lack of good Mexican food, but really lack of good Chinese. I can't get good Chinese fit takeout here. I mean, we don't eat. I mean, I love Chinese food. We've had precious little of it in the last 10 months because it's just crappy. It's just awful. So there's one for you.
Yeah, it counts.
Okay, quick, and we've sort of touched on this. What's changed the most about how you shop for food in the last 10 months?
Well, certainly, it's doing things remotely. My wife and I've written about this in the past, because we love going to Wegmans. Wegmans was an event for us on Saturday afternoons. And again, we've been married a long time, so anyone who's snickering right now, wait till you're married 37 years. But we would go up to Wegmans, we'd have lunch, and we'd kind of do this leisurely shopping trip. And shopping now, honestly, I have described it to you. I always feel like I'm James Bond walking into an aisle. You look down the aisle. It's like the cop movies. Is anyone coming? Do I have to like dodge past some carts? And then you go in, you grab your item, you get out of the aisle. And it's so unenjoyable.
For me, Prime Now pickup at Whole Foods. It's the single thing that I had used once or twice before the pandemic. I use it now a couple of times a week. It's $35 and it's free for free. You go drive down there, you pop the trunk, they stick it in the back, and listen, you can't stop it for anything at Whole Foods without spending $35. I use it like a convenience store in some ways. And
what you're saying, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. There are a lot of people with Prime memberships who are not going to walk away from this because, and you've talked about this extensively and very correctly, that the way to make your Prime membership work is to use it a lot. It's right. The brilliance of that loyalty program. And a lot of folks are going to come out of this period saying, you know what, it worked. It did these things we needed. And what the heck, we're paying for Prime. We might as well keep using it at Whole Foods.
Okay, best favorite, and it can be cut more than one, TV show, movie you saw. Since we co-wrote a book about movies,
yes.
What was your favorite from the past year?
And this one, you had clued me you were going to ask. They were actually, and they're all Netflix shows, which I find interesting. I've become addicted to Netflix. But there are 3 shows that I would hold up and recommend anywhere. First is the comedy that won all the Emmys last year that I had never seen. I binged watched it, and it is fabulous, and it's not spelled the way it sounds, folks.
Say it. Well, this is an adult.
Schitt's Creek.
Say it again. I stepped on your line.
It's Schitt's Creek. It is an amazing comedy. It's Eugene Levy and his son Daniel wrote it. It's incredibly quirky, and it works. And its final season, which was the one that won all the awards, honestly deserved it. The show ended in a way that you just wanted to cry out of happiness for the show. So that would be number 1. Number 2, as a drama, And this one caught me by surprise, and I loved it. Something called The Queen's Gambit, which actually made
Right?
chess. Yes, it made the game of chess, which is something of a dull game. It is very intriguing when you play it, but it made chess dramatic. It made it suspenseful. And the story of this young woman who becomes this grandmaster in chess, and there's all kinds of secondary plots going on. It's compelling. It's 7 episodes. It is totally worth watching.
Okay.
And the other one I would throw in, I am not a fan of reality shows on TV, but my daughter got me hooked on this one. And unfortunately, they stopped making it because it's so funny. It's called Nailed It. And it's a baking show where they take people who don't know how to bake. They give them an impossibly intricate thing to make in an impossibly short period of time. So it's a disaster every time out. And they make something and it looks terrible, and the host yells, "Nailed it!" And it's once you start watching it, it's addictive because it's how bad is it going to be this week? So those 3 shows, Schitt's Creek, Nailed It, The Queen's Gambit, all worth watching.
Okay, so mine very quickly. Ted Lasso on Apple TV. It just made me happy, and I heartily recommend it. It's one of those, and my son had recommended it. I blew us away. It was great. On the Rocks, also on Apple TV. That's the movie with Bill Murray. Again, just made me feel good. I'll watch Bill Murray in anything. In this one, he's just unbelievably charming, and it's really well done. I've talked about it a lot on Morning Newsbeat, the documentary, The Social Dilemma.
I'm with you on that one.
Totally great. The movie Mank, which is about the making of Citizen Kane. Maybe a little esoteric for people who are not in love with the movies and maybe not in love with Citizen Kane, but Mank is terrific. And a movie I wrote about here on Morning Newsbeat called First Cow, which is a wonderful movie that takes place in 1820s Oregon. Part of the reason I love it is it's Oregon, but I thought as from what little I know, it seemed as accurate a depiction of the pioneer experience as I can imagine. There was nothing prettied up about it. There seemed to be no Hollywoodization of the experience, and I really, really love that. And I'm just going to say the one thing that the thing I hated the most, I think the program I hated the most, was Spencer Confidential, which was an adaptation of an Ace Atkins, Robert B. Parker novel, which just paid absolutely no attention to the source material, didn't respect the source material, and I just hated it. And I think it's really important to show some loyalty or at least some respect for the source material, even if you're going to mess around with it a little bit. That really bothered me. Although I have to say, I haven't rethought my opinion, but it's made me think a little bit about the notion of demographics, because it was actually a pretty popular movie on Netflix for people, and I suspect most of the people for whom it was popular had never read one of the books.
Yeah, you have a different perspective on
it. Maybe it just doesn't matter. To me, it does, but maybe it just doesn't matter. Anyway, listen.
And let me just add in one thing, because the last movie I saw in a theater, and it's a complicated movie, but it made me think. And by the way, The Social Dilemma, which you covered quite a bit on Morning Newsbeat, should be must viewing for everybody, especially people with children, because what has happened with social networking it's just so much more depth. But the movie I want to talk about was Parasite. It was the last movie I saw in the theater.
Oh, great movie.
And it defies description, but you will think about it for weeks afterward, because it's eye-opening on so many levels.
Oh, and I forgot one. Trial of Chicago 7, which was also great. We could do this forever. And by the way, when we're bored, we've done this a lot over the last 10 months. But listen, we have probably overstayed our welcome. I hope we're able to maybe watch this. If they watch the whole thing, maybe they had a drink in their hands. If they watched it in pieces, that's great too. I know we both want to wish everybody the happiest of holidays. Morning Newsbeat will be on vacation on holiday until Monday, January 4th. I think we're both looking forward to taking a little break. Although at some point, and Michael will tell you, at some point during that time, he will call me or I will call him and say, Oh man, I wish I had a place to write about this today because something will
Absolutely.
happen that will make one of us or both of us nuts.
And our wives cannot wait for us for that moment to happen because
Anyway, listen, happy holidays. And as we wrap up 2020, this is what's on our minds. And as always, we want to hear what's on your mind.